Good morning, everyone, or I suppose good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from today. So today we're here to do a Q&A panel, Ask Us Anything about automating workflows. We're still seeing some users trickle in, so while we do that, or while we wait for everyone to join us, I'll just start by doing a quick round of introductions. And maybe we can go around and introduce ourselves and also tell us about a TV show that you guys have been watching recently, or what you guys got up to for Canada Day weekend, or something a bit fun. Otherwise, our introductions might be quite repetitive because we do all belong to the same team. So I'll start. My name is Holly Coxon, and I'm an FME Server Support Specialist. And I have been at SAFE for 3 years now on the FME Server team. And I guess I can talk about what I did during our heat wave. If anybody doesn't know, BC recently got surrounded by a heat dome. And we hit over 40 degrees for a couple of days. We definitely don't have the infrastructure for that, so it was a struggle, at least for me. And so I spent my weekend floating down a river, and I did it on Saturday, and then I went back and did it on Sunday and spent 4 hours floating down a river each day to try and keep myself cool. So yeah, that's a bit about me. I'll pass it over to Sanai. She's next on my webcam. So.
Awesome. I'm Sanai. I'm also an FME Server Support Specialist. I've been at SAFE for about just over a year now. Yeah, and I can also talk about what I did over the heat wave, which was move all of my belongings from BC to Alberta. I've moved to Calgary recently. I will say that move was not the most enjoyable during a heat wave. U-Hauls get very toasty inside. Definitely delayed the unpacking process until it cooled down a little bit, but yeah, that was an experience.
Unfortunate timing.
Yeah, no. It's like, oh, I won't move in the winter, so there's no snow or anything, or spring, so it's not raining. Wasn't expecting 40 degrees, but no. How about you? I'll pass it on to Sienna. She's next to me.
Okay, hi. Yeah, I've been an FME Server Support Specialist for 3 years. I started probably officially a month before Holly, so we started around the same time. And over the heat wave, I actually went backpacking up to Garibaldi Lake, if you're familiar with BC. So it's like an alpine lake. So we walked up a mountain with our backpacks on, and then we slept by snow that night. So it was like the coolest sleep I've had in the past few days or so. What about you, Mark?
Hi everyone, I'm Mark. I am an FME Server Support Specialist. I've been here for just under a year. During the heat wave, yeah, I mostly stayed indoors during that time, but after that I enjoyed a couple of days of golf in the more normal weather. In terms of TV shows I'm watching The Office and Futurama right now.
Nice.
Definitely winners there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, so we make up, I guess, almost over half of the FME Server support team. So if this webinar is completely driven by you guys, so we don't have any content to share, we're just here to answer your questions. So there's 2 ways that you can ask questions today. We'll be the ones answering them. You can either easily send it through text through the questions panel within the GoToWebinar control view. Or if you'd like to, you're also more than welcome to join us on air, turn your webcams on, unmute yourselves and ask your question that way. And if you want to do that, simply press the raise hand button and Stephanie will come online to guide you through that process as well. So just give everyone a few minutes to ask some questions, and then we'll get started.
I guess I kind of have a question for the audience. So I think in 2019 is when we made the switch from notifications to automation. So I was just kind of curious, how many people are mainly using automations now over notifications? Like, which do you feel more comfortable with? Have you ever seen notifications before, or is that just a thing of the past for you? So if you want to type in your answers, I think that'd be great to see.
Great. We do have a question in about receiving emails when Survey 123 records are submitted. I think that might be a great question for Sienna. I think you recently did a tutorial on this on our community.
Yeah, there is a tutorial on the community. So basically with this automation, you want to set up a webhook in Survey 123. This webhook can be read in by FME Server using the webhook trigger in FME Server Automations. Typically, what I see when people can't do this is that their FME server is not publicly accessible. Your FME server has to be publicly accessible for this to work, because Survey 123 has to be able to access the FME server to transfer that data over. So that's kind of the first thing I would check if you are seeing issues with this. You can get a free trial of Cloud and see if that works for you as well. So we do have publicly accessible options.
Great, yeah. And speaking of webhooks, they're really great for integrating FME Server with pretty much any application, because all they are is kind of a URL endpoint that is designed to receive messages. So as long as your application has an interface that allows you to plug that in, whenever a certain action happens, so whether that be Survey 123, sending an email, submitting a form, or a database update, or a work order submission in your asset management tool, all of those things can be connected through a webhook to drive your automation process, which will then run workspaces to process data and also to send outgoing emails and notifications after that as well. So I think we have a follow-up. Oh, sorry, Sam.
Sorry, I'm like, I don't know if I just like go away into the shadows now. I was gonna come online to help bring some people on who raised their hands, but it looks like they lowered them.
Okay. Oh no, sorry. I think you were covered by my control panel. I didn't even see you pop up.
Oh, no worries. But yes, if anyone does want to come online, this is what'll happen. I'll come on and help you get set up. But you,
yes, if you please re-raise your hand. So yeah, we had a follow-up question just about FME Server being publicly accessible. So does FME Server need to be publicly accessible even with ArcGIS Enterprise when they are both on the same network?
So that's a bit of a different story. Sorry, I didn't realize that with your question. So if it is internal, then I don't think that's the issue anymore, because internal stuff should be able to access each other. So unless you had like firewalls or stuff preventing the networking there, then I don't think it needs to be publicly accessible. So if you're still having issues with this, it's probably best just to get in contact with us directly through our support, and we'll be able to help you out more and do some troubleshooting with you, because there could be lots of things. But yeah, internal sites with webhooks are totally fine. It's like if you were just to open up Postman and send a post request to your FME server, that would work fine. But if you're using something like a public Survey 123 to your internal FME server, it's just not going to work.
Awesome. Thank you, Sienna. I think you addressed a couple of people's questions there. So let's see. We've got another one come in here. We have a handful of automations that address file pickups over a given range of days. For example, we pull a directory for the first 3 days of the month to listen for a new file and then execute some workspace. Is there a way to turn off the polling once the file has been picked up? For example, if the file comes in on day 1, can we stop polling for the remainder of the 2 days? I have a couple of ideas for that one. I would suggest you would need some kind of schedule to actually turn off the entire automation. So what you could potentially have is at the end of the workspace, an HTTP request action. And what you could do is set that up to call the REST API endpoint for that automation to actually disable it entirely, which would turn off the poll. However, you would then need something to be able to turn that automation back on for the next 3-day period. So again, you might need like a second automation set up with a schedule, calling again a REST API endpoint to enable it every 3 days. I think that would work. Hopefully that made sense. Not sure if anybody else has any other ideas that they want to add on to that one.
Yeah, I was thinking that too with the REST endpoint at the end of it. But I don't know if you're using an automation to turn off an automation, would that work? Like, I think that's something
it should
that.
Work.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, I've done it before.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it definitely should work because you're basically making the call before the automation gets turned off. So
Yeah.
the order of events, it will happen very quickly.
Yeah.
Pretty much as soon as that message hits the HTTP request, it should turn it off. It's just the sequence, obviously, is in the right order. But yeah, it would be quick.
Okay. Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So maybe while I'm reading out the next question, one of you guys might be able to find that endpoint in the documentation and just share that in the chat.
Yeah, I can do that.
That might be helpful. Okay. So let's have a look at the next question. So we've got a question about doing some loops within a workflow. There is some looping capabilities and automations, but if you're looking to do it in a workflow, you're probably going to need to use a custom transformer. Stephanie, I have a feeling there's a separate webinar coming up on looping.
There most definitely is.
Yeah.
I'm just finding the link for that one.
Perfect.
August 11th. I'll chat that out.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, looping itself is pretty complex topic, kind of outside the scope of just an Ask Me Anything webinar. We would definitely want to dive into a workspace and demonstrate how to set that up because it does go into custom transformers. So it looks like Stephanie's just been able to share out that link and definitely check that one out.
I will do a quick plug for the Advanced API webinar that Sienna and I did a couple of weeks ago because Sienna does a really good demonstration of using a custom transformer to loop. It is using REST API, but you might find it helpful just to kind of walk through the process in that scenario. So maybe I'll share that webinar link also in the chat just now.
Great, thanks, Sinai.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a look. So yeah, just a reminder, if you do have any questions, you can just send them through the question panel or raise your hand and you can come on and ask your question live as well. So next question we have is, can we save the converted file output path and folder name via REST API? I'm not sure if that's referring to a directory trigger, or sorry, a directory watch or an FTP watch or one of those triggers, or where this path is coming from. And also if you're referring to our REST API, the FME Server REST API, sorry, or if another REST API. So perhaps you could just expand on your question, and we can get an answer for you for that one. Okay. So we've got another a good question come in here. So how do I pass information from one workspace to another?
Sure, I can talk about that one.
Right.
So with our automations, we have output keys, and essentially this is a way where you can pass values between workspaces into downstream actions. And you can configure these in your actions in the output keys section when you open up your workspace actions or even your triggers, and also external actions. And this way you can consistently pass information between your workspaces without having to manually enter things in or run them individually.
Great. Do you want to, Mark, maybe also talk about the automations writer?
Yes, for sure. So we have an extra writer that you can add to your workspaces in FME Workbench called the automations writer. And this is a way where you can create I guess you could say messages for each output feature that's going to these writers, and then you can pass those into downstream actions as well.
Nice, yeah. So the keys allow you to kind of pass pre-formatted messages that we know exist on each of the different triggers and actions. And then this automation writer gives you the power to actually pass information that is unique to your workspace and the data that it's processing out as well. So that's really powerful to be able to pass information outside of the workspace, which previously was a bit more complex to do before automations were around. Okay, let's have a look here. Okay, do we have any tips for troubleshooting and debugging automations?
I'll start. I'm sure there's many, but I would first always check out my automations logs. So from the automation page, you can probably go to the top bar menu. It might be a file, and then you can view the automation log to see all of the messages about that automation. And you can also see the triggered jobs logs. So if any of your jobs are failing within that automations or not performing how you might expect them to, you can go in and view the individual log for each of the jobs as that automation has run it. You guys might have some more ideas though. I'm sure there's many ways to go about troubleshooting automation.
Yeah, one tip I have would be to simplify your automation as much as possible. So if the issue is with the sending the email at the end, disable the first parts of your workflow and just add the manual trigger to the email. So you're only focusing on that portion rather than having to run the whole event over and over again. And that way you can try and eliminate what is actually causing the problem. So if it works with the manual trigger, then you can take a step back and kind of work your way backwards to identify the problem that way as well. I see Stephanie's come on. Do we have somebody that would like to come online?
We do. Christopher, if you still want to come on live, I will promote you. If not, just reject that invite that comes over. So I'm going to go ahead and make you a panelist. And once you get that, please share your microphone and webcam. All right, I see you are unmuted. Any luck with the audio?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Ah, success.
Hi.
Hello. Oh, we lost you. Don't worry about your webcam. If it's not working, you can just do it with audio. I'm going to send you.
Okay. I just didn't know if you're showing different slides.
Oh, no, we're just showing this one slide right now since it is kind of an audience-driven webinar. We don't really have any slides prepared for this, but Yeah, good question, because normally we do have slides being shown. So no, you should just be seeing this slide on how to ask questions.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. All right.
Okay.
Although that being said, if anyone wants to take over the screen at any point, let me know and I can pass over controls.
Great. Thanks, Steph. Okay, so next question we have, within an automation, is it possible to send emails to different addresses based on the attributes on a feature service? For example, read an XML configuration file which stores the attribute value and the email address. Not sure if anybody wants to tackle this one.
Yeah, I can talk about this one because this is a great use case for the output keys, just recently covered, but a couple of minutes ago. So when you are passing those features with the different emails into your email action, it will send an email for each of the different features, and then you can set up your workspace or the action to pass that email attribute as the recipient in the emailer action.
Awesome, thank you, Mark. And we do have a Getting Started with Automations tutorial series, which dives into tutorials about probably most of the scenarios that you might be looking to cover as you start working with automations. And that definitely includes using the automations writer, and we have an article specifically on the different types of event keys. So I'm not sure if that was already shared out, but I will share that link out again now. I think that's a great first place to go as you start working with automation. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Steph. Yeah, so it has a huge range of articles. It's kind of a landing page, kind of all the beginner things that you would like to do. And there are some more advanced workflows on there as well that look at merging and looping and things like that with inside automations as well. Okay, and we had a question about sharing the links with the recording. I believe that's something we can do, but I'll let Stephanie answer that one.
Yeah, that is something I haven't heard if that is something I can do with GoToWebinar is allow other people to export the links. So I'm going to say if there's a link that you see that you really want to save, I might miss it, to be honest. So make sure you do save it out of the chat. I will do my best to include everything here and get that out to people. But yeah, if you're seeing something that you really want to save, I would just quickly go bookmark it right now. And there's also, if you're looking for something related to what we talked about today, definitely look on the community. You could just do a search for it, like Getting Started with Automations, and you can find it that way as well. So none of the links should be lost out there. There are certainly ways to go find it, but I'll do my best to include them all with the recording.
Great, thanks, Steph. Okay, so I have a question from somebody that's new to FME Server. They'd like to know how FME Server integrates with other services via APIs. And the examples they've given are Git and Jenkins.
So we did a webinar a little while back on using REST APIs. This was more desktop based because typically when you're accessing REST APIs, you'd make a workspace in FME desktop and use the API or the HTTP caller to access the API that you need to. So we do have some webinars there. Maybe someone can chat that out. We have like a more basic and then an advanced one. As well, there is an external action in automations to make HTTP requests. So let's say after you run a workspace, you publish a file somewhere and you want to get that file somewhere else through a REST call, you can use the HTTP request external action there. I'm not sure if Sinai worked on the webinar with me, so maybe she wanted to elaborate on something a little bit.
That was summarized most of the bases. I definitely check out these webinars. Web services with automations can be really powerful tool for you, I think. Yeah, I think that I would focus on the desktop side of it, and then you can look into automating those calls and interacting with your web services via automations after the fact. Yeah, I think those webinars and tutorials will be a good place to start. It really depends on the API as well. I'll just quickly wrap up here that I would definitely start with the API documentation for whatever specific REST API you're hoping to use, and then go from there for integrating. Sorry, Holly, I kept talking.
No, I was about to cut you off, so that's fine. I just also wanted to add that, yeah, whenever you're looking to actually do something with the data, transform it or process it in any way, that is something that's going to take place on the FME desktop side of things, where you initially author that workflow. So in terms of actually making any calls to a specific API and working with that data, that's happening in FME desktop. And then when you want to bring FME server into the picture, that's when you want to then automate these workflows based on something else happening. So perhaps that is receiving an email or a directory or monitoring another application. And then that's where webhooks come into play. So you kind of want to explore both webhooks and APIs. And webhooks will receive information without having anything kind of trigger it to run, whereas when you work with a REST API, you have to kind of fetch that data down or send it back up. So they kind of work in parallel with one another, and they have slightly different functions. So when you're looking at integration with another application, you're probably needing to use FME Desktop to work with the API. And then in FME Server, you'll be probably more likely using a webhook or something else to actually trigger that workflow to run.
And just in case we didn't mention it specifically, we might have, but I'll say it again, the transformer you really want to look into using for web services is the HTTP caller. That's our transformer for sending out REST API calls. You can make all kinds of requests, so get, post, include bodies, different parameters, anything you can do with an API, you can use the HTTP caller for. So that's a transformer to look up. And I'll send out the documentation for that transformer in the chat right now.
I also just wanted to say, if you're still like a little fuzzy on webhooks versus APIs, I just chatted out a blog that's really useful that goes over all these things. So the blog's right there if you're curious to learn more.
Yes, that blog has a great analogy about delivering mail to describe the difference between a webhook and an API, which I think it depicts it really nicely. So I definitely give that one a read if you're curious to learn a bit more there. Okay. So yeah, just a reminder again, if you do have any questions, feel free to write them through the questions panel. Or if you raise your hand, then Stephanie will be able to come online and you can share your microphone and ask the question live as well. So while the question panel's gone a little bit quiet, I do have some information that I think would be worth sharing. We've got a new feature coming out in 2021.1, which was just released yesterday. So I think it would be great to address that. So it's called the split merge block. And we did already have a merge action. So it might be a bit unclear as to what the difference between those two is. Mark, I think you've done quite a bit of work with the split merge block. Did you maybe want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So new in 2021.1, we have a new action you can find in the bottom left corner in your automation canvas. It's called the split merge block. When you add it to your canvas, it's kind of like a bookmark where you can wrap around different actions, but you can only include workspace actions at the moment. And it's designed to run all the workspaces within that block all together and in parallel until they're all complete. And then it will send one message per input that came in out. So this way you can actually condense down a lot of your workflows, such as running or triggering the workspaces inside that block hundreds and hundreds of times. And let's say you want to send an email as a notification. You don't want to send hundreds and hundreds of emails as your output. You just want to send maybe just one because you only triggered it once with, let's say, a schedule. So you can condense all of that down by connecting your trigger as an input to the split merge block, running all your jobs, and then as an output, you will send just one message to confirm that all these jobs had complete.
Thanks, Mark. So yeah, this.
Oh yeah,
sorry.
I'll list one big difference between the merge action and the split merge block is that in the past, you could not use the automation writer with merge actions. So you could not manage like the different features that would come out from your workspaces from those automation writers. But now we are supporting that in the split merge block.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, that's the last thing that I wanted to add on to your original answer. So yeah, that's great. So because with the automations writer, basically we don't know how many workspaces are going to run as a result of that output port, which was the challenge that we had with the original merge action. And so this more defined block was the solution. And I'm really excited. I think it has some great use cases, especially for those of you who are used to maybe using the FME Server job submitter to kind of track how many workspaces being run, and a combination with the sampler or something else in FME desktop to kind of get that single message output. Okay.
If you want to see it in action, we have a recently published tutorial that Mark wrote called Job Orchestration with Automations. And it features the split merge block and kind of discusses some of these points we talked about. And I just put that in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Sienna. Okay, we have a couple more questions going back to the webhook. I just realized I said Sienna, not Sinai. Sorry, I'm not laughing. Thank you, Sinai. I'm distracted. So there's a few questions coming in. Yeah, so going back to the webhook, we had a question. If we'd like to use a webhook, will the trigger automatically create a webhook URL? So I think maybe Sienna can answer that one.
Yeah, so it will. So as soon as you add the trigger for the webhook URL, I believe first you have to save the automation, then the webhook URL will appear. You just copy and paste that into your application and it should work.
I was specifically asking about the HTTPS, if we weren't going to have a publicly available webhook.
So the webhook URL is generated based on your FME server host. So it will only be HTTPS if you've configured your FME server for HTTPS, which is something that you'll need to do post-installation. It requires a couple of updates to the Tomcat configuration, and you'll need to provide your own certificates there as well. Yeah, as long as your server is HTTPS, then your webhook will be as well. Okay, and staying on the webhook theme, is there another way apart from using a webhook to trigger changes from an ArcGIS feature service in FME Server? I don't know of one, so I'm not sure if anybody else does.
Yeah, so if you don't want to use webhooks, and ArcGIS Online now does have webhooks that you can use. But if you don't want to use that, the only other option is to just have a schedule and a change detection workflow to just try and see if there's anything new in your feature service. We do have a tutorial on that, and I'll link it in the chat about how to do that with the change detection workflow. But yeah, if you're not using the webhook to get that automatic, I guess, feedback, then you'll have to just have a schedule and just pull it and wait for changes to occur.
That's actually a really great point, because obviously not every application will actually have the ability to set up a webhook. So just setting up a schedule to regularly run a workspace that reads in that format and can make comparisons and check for new data is kind of a workaround as well for anything that doesn't have a webhook. Okay. So a quick question about the webhook work with a self-signed certificate. Yes, you can set up HTTPS with a self-signed certificate. We would just recommend for production FME servers that you are using a certificate that's signed and trusted by a certificate authority. But of course, if your FME server is for internal use only, or if you're happy to go with a self-signed certificate for your FME server installation, the webhook will absolutely work through HTTPS with that certificate as well.
And from the webhook side of things, so you can generate a webhook using FME Server, and then it's up to the other application to decide whether to use it or not. Like some applications might not want to trigger data if you're not using HTTPS, and that's a security thing on that end of it. So we can't like make general recommendations for all other services of what they will accept and what they won't accept.
Thanks, Sienna. Okay. Quick question here. I might have missed some of the context for this one. Is there a way to easily distinguish between incorrect network path and inadequate network access? I'm not sure if that touches on something we discussed earlier, or if anybody has any ideas, we might need some more information on that question.
I think it's just a common thing that comes up where if we can't get to a file, our logging message will be like, we either can't reach this file or this file does not exist. And so if you're trying to troubleshoot that, you kind of have to do one or another. Like one, make sure that the file exists and maybe just try reading it in on its own. Can FME server have access to that file? And if not, like try just like writing a text file to that location. Can we even just read in a text file? And that will give you an idea of whether or not we have access to it or not. If you're starting off with troubleshooting FME server and you're not sure about what permissions your FME server has, that's typically controlled by whatever account is running the FME server engine. So look into that account. Is it like a local system, which probably doesn't have access to your network? Or is it a user account? And if it's a user account, make sure that user account has access to wherever you're trying to get to. And if you're having troubles with that at all, like please just submit a support case to us. We'd be happy to help you troubleshoot it.
And just in case anyone needs clarification about the accounts, you can check this in the services on, at least for Windows. You can go to your services and then find the FME server engine service and then look at the log on as section, whether it's local system or a domain account.
Well, thank you, Sienna and Mark. Okay, so next question we have is there any way to determine all paths used in Workspaces? Any API call that could search through all the logs to determine file paths? I would actually, rather than going through the API, I'd probably suggest using the FME Workspace Reader. there's a format specifically for reading in FME Workspaces, and it will scan through all of your readers, writers, transformers, published parameters, and I think that would be the best way to determine all of your file paths, whether they're referenced by published parameter or just a parameter within a transformer, and that should all be brought in by the Workspace Reader. It can be a bit complicated to filter through because it reads in a lot of information, but that would give you everything you need, and then probably you would just point that reader to a directory if you want to do it for all of the workspaces that are on FME Server. You could point it to the repositories folder in your system share. Okay. Let's have a look. Yeah, if you guys have any more questions, again, just chat them in through the questions or raise your hand if you'd like to be invited to be a panelist. Okay, so another one that we've had is what is the difference between using the FME Server job submitter versus an automation? And when is one preferred over the other? Mark, did you want to answer this one?
Yeah, sure. So the FME Server Job Submitter is a transformer that you can use in your workspaces, and that will run a single job, depending on the number of inputs, of course. And automations, you can run them over and over, however many times you want, and these are all created and managed in FME Server. So when you're deciding which one to use over the other, automations are great if you want to handle many different kinds of, many different kinds of triggers that we provide, such as directory watches, scheduling, and let's say you want to chain up lots of jobs together with your automations and deal with more advanced functionality that we offer on FME Server, such as queues, looping. This can all be done in the automations, and there will be some limitations to that when you're doing it from the workspace side with just the job submitter. Does anyone have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say, sorry, excuse me. If you can use an automation, I would use the automation over the FME Server Job Submitter, just because like the logs are so much clearer, like it's so much easier to see what's actually going on if you ever need to troubleshoot anything. And it's kind of split into modules, so you know exactly what's going on at what time, what got triggered, what didn't get triggered. So if you can use an automation, I would use an automation. However, there are some one-off cases where you might need to use the FME Server Job Submitter. How does everyone else feel?
Yeah, I'd also add a vote to using automations over the FME Server Job Submitter. Another reason being is because when you use the FME Server Job Submitter, you have your parent and your child workflows, which means you can have two workspaces running at the same time, so occupying two engines, whereas by containing the workflow within automations, that essentially acts as your parent workflow, so you're only going to be using one engine throughout that process.
One niche case that I'll say for the FME Server Job Submitter is maybe if you're using a server app to kick off sort of a series of workflows, then you might want to use that transformer to have that chaining of workspaces.
Yeah, you could also use the manual trigger in automations, and then within a workspace have the HTTP caller triggering the manual trigger endpoint. So really for most use cases, either will do the job. So it can also be personal preference. If you're a long-term FME Server user and you're very familiar with the FME Server Job Submitter, and that's the route that you want to take, it's going to work. But if you're brand new to FME Server, just getting started, then probably just sticking to automations would be my recommendation. Okay. So I guess I mentioned the manual trigger. Does anybody want to talk a little bit more about that and what that does? I can talk about it. Yeah, because the manual trigger was new, I'm going to say in 2021, but it might have been midway through 2020. And so within our automations previously, we had kind of triggers that would either react to an event elsewhere that happened in real time, or triggers that were polling something for information, so kind of near real time scenarios. But we found that a lot of our users wanted to use automations to orchestrate large chaining workflow events, but they didn't necessarily have anything that needed to trigger them at a repeat interval, but rather they just wanted to orchestrate this workflow, but then run it manually whenever it was required and insert the information that needed to be provided. So we introduced this manual trigger, which basically has a trigger button within the automations interface, but it also has a REST API endpoint. So you can use this to trigger your automation actions as well. Yeah.
And I'll just add that you can, oh, go ahead,
No,
Sienna. Might be the same thing, because I just wanted to mention that you can simulate running the automation from another protocol by using input JSON. So that's really helpful for debugging or testing your automations. If you want to test something that's triggered by a directory watch or a webhook, you can enter that in with the manual input without having to actually trigger that action on the other side. So it's going to save a lot of time when you are testing and building automations. I know it has for me so far. I've gotten a lot of use out of it in that context.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Oh, sorry, Sienna.
I was just going to say, I just chatted out the article for using the manual trigger. You go, Holly.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say previously, when I was testing the directory watch, I'd be going in and dropping a file and dropping another file, and I'd end up with 10, 15 files, and I'd delete them, and it was a bit of a mess behind the scenes. So definitely using it to help curate your automation originally based on the JSON message of another trigger is a really good use case as well. Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left. I welcome any more questions, and if not, then we can probably wrap up a few minutes early. So yeah, if you do have any last questions for us, please send them through the chat panel now.
Awesome. So while people are maybe thinking of those last questions, I'm just going to do a quick invite for tomorrow's webinar. If anyone wants to join us, we're doing one on date time in FME. So I'm going to chat out the link for that. It's at the same time. So if this time worked for you and you enjoyed this webinar, we hope to see you at the one tomorrow.
Thanks, Stephanie. I have one question come in here. When should I use automations instead of the schedules page?
So basically we have the schedules page that existed before automations, but you can also schedule within an automation itself. Both are very valid and both can be used. Automation would be better if you want to like chain a bunch of workspaces together or use external actions. but the schedules page is also just a simple way of viewing your schedule. So I guess if you want to set up a simple schedule, use the schedule page or use an automation. If you want to do something more complex, use an automation. I'm not sure if we have a best practice around that. I haven't actually thought about that. Does anyone else?
I don't think we do. I think you're completely correct. It's really depends on what you're trying to schedule. If it's a single workspace, then the schedules page is completely fine. If you want to be scheduling multiple workflows or multiple workspaces, or have other external actions or other triggers as well, then automations would be better. Okay, I think that about wraps it up. So I guess we'll stay on the line for another 5 minutes or so in case anybody does have any questions, and we'll just answer them probably through the chat panel rather than live. But if not, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Have a great rest of your day. And if you do have any further questions about FME Server and automations in particular, feel free to reach out on live chat, ask in the community, or create a support case as well, and we'll be happy to help you there. So thanks very much, and thank you, Sinai, Sienna, Mark, and Stephanie as well.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. We can, I'll go ahead and kind of close this down. We'll turn up our webcams, but as Holly said, we'll be behind the scenes for another 5 minutes if anyone has last questions.